1, 2, 3, 4.
Mako's Ambassador Paint Service is priced right. We chemically scrub and prepare your car's old surface and give it a high-grade finish. Now only $199 at Mako.
Live at 5, Central Iowa's #1 afternoon newscast.
Good morning. In an attempt to revive his lagging bid for re-election, President Bush, as anticipated, is poised to tap Secretary of State James Baker to head up his campaign. The shake-up plan supposedly calls for Secretary Baker to replace Sam Skinner as Chief of Staff, with Lawrence Eagleburger moving into Mr. Baker's place. Those moves expected to be announced today, Thursday, August 13, 1992.
From NBC News, this is Today with Bryant, Gumbel, and Catherine Currick.
Good morning. Welcome to Today, Thursday morning. Margaret Larson continues to join while Katie's away. She'll be back on Monday. We're going to be taking a look at that planned shake-up in the Bush White House in this half hour. John Dancy will be giving us a report on Baker to the rescue. We'll also be talking about the move with Clinton aide James Carville a little bit later. We've got international matters in our mind, too.
Bryant, also this morning, we're going to examine the twin tragedies of Somalia and Yugoslavia, two places caught up in horrendous civil war, terrible problems for refugee populations in both countries. What should the UN do? What can we do? We'll talk about that this morning.
On the entertainment front, Clint Black, Sandra Bernhardt, Gene Shalit's going to be
What a combination.
Not together, separately.
Okay.
And Gene Shalit's in the Critics' Corner with a double feature. Let's move to the news desk. Start the morning with Ann Curry. Ann, good morning.
Good morning, Bryant. A big change is expected at the White House. Sources say Secretary of State James Baker is on his way back to run the Bush campaign. The announcement is expected today, just 4 days before the start of the Republican National Convention. Jim Miklaszewski is at the White House this morning with more on the story. Jim, good morning.
Good morning, Ann. You know, the Baker move has been expected for weeks, but now GOP sources tell us he'll take over as Chief of Staff in what amounts to an 11th hour White House shakeup.
Republican sources say Baker will replace Chief of Staff Sam Skinner to run the White House, but more importantly, revive Bush's flagging re-election campaign. Baker knows what it's like to run from behind. In 1976, Baker helped Jerry Ford come from 33 points back, only to lose by a hair. 4 years ago, he engineered Bush's 17-point comeback. At the White House, Skinner's leadership has been considered ineffective. Critics charge he's been indecisive. That's not been a problem for Baker.
Jim Baker himself knows how to make a decision, and because of his relationship with the president, he can make a decision stick.
And because of that relationship, Baker can tell Bush when he's wrong.
If Jim Baker gives the president some advice, the president, number one, will listen.
The Clinton campaign calls Baker formidable and believe Bush is desperate.
He'll do what he can to save his political hide.
Baker will pretty much run the entire show, domestic policy, foreign policy, and the campaign. There will be no question who's boss. And for that reason, some Bush advisors say Skinner just has to go. And
Miklaszewski, thank you. Democrat Bill Clinton says he's concerned about American foreign policy without James Baker at the State Department. Clinton says he hopes the move doesn't slow the efforts toward peace in the Middle East. Today, he addresses the World Affairs Council in Los Angeles. Clinton continues to hold a big lead over President Bush. A new ABC News Washington Post poll shows Clinton leading 61% to 35%. Today, the UN Security Council is expected to vote on authorizing all means necessary to safeguard relief shipments to war-torn Sarajevo, and that includes the use of force. But while many in the Bosnian capital welcome the UN move, others fear it will trigger more violence and more refugees. Meantime, there are hopes new talks will soon get underway to stop the fighting. Rick Davis is in Sarajevo this morning with more on that. Rick, good morning.
Good morning, Ann. Milan Panic is the prime minister of what is left of Yugoslavia, but he is not the muscle that makes the country move. The muscle man is Slobodan Milosevic, the president of Serbia. But Panic is in Yugoslavia, is in this country today, is in Sarajevo today, and he is, in the eyes of many of the critics, the sweet face on what is the body of Serbian aggression. And certainly the Serbs have been helping the Serbian militia that has caused so much of the violence here. Panic claims to be a man of peace, but peace did not follow him to Sarajevo. There have been artillery attacks from the hills all through the morning. And as one far more vivid indication of what's going on here, an ABC camera crew came to town today for just one day to do a story on Milan Panic. A producer in that crew, David Kaplan, was seriously wounded. They never made it past the airport road. They had just arrived in Sarajevo. They were on that road that is occupied, as our BBC colleagues say, by freelance nutters. It is not a safe place. Apparently, the producer thought it was. That's what he'd been told. He had not been wearing a flak jacket. He was shot from behind. He is seriously wounded in the stomach. He's in he's in a hospital now, and we do not know his condition. He is one of at least 60 journalists wounded here. 40 have died.
Rick Davis, thank you very much. Well, there's new fighting today in Afghanistan, where rebels have launched another rocket attack on Kabul. One report puts the death toll at more than 100, with hundreds more wounded. Federal investigators are in Virginia today trying to find out what caused an Amtrak train to derail last night. 70 people were hurt when the Amtrak Colonial jumped the tracks near Newport News. The accident may have been caused by vandalism. And a new study says Americans are spending more than they need for gasoline, buying high-octane fuel their cars may not need. The study by the group Public Citizen says drivers are paying about $3 billion a year more than they should. The study blames mislabeled gas pumps and deceptive ads. That is the news at 6 minutes past the hour. Let's go back to Bryant.
Remember the old days you used to drive in, somebody used to pump your gas, wipe your windshield,
no, actually,
check your tires?
I don't really remember that. It must have been a long time ago.
Harder to find. Let's go on out to the nation's capital and the capital weatherman of all time.
Hey,
Dr.
bless
Scott,
your
good
heart.
morning.
You had the nicest looking tie on this morning, Mr. G.
Well, thank you very much. This was a gift from Mr. Squire, I do believe.
Mr.
Bob
Listen,
Squire?
that's terrific. You declared it, I'm sure, to NBC. You know, they get you for that. Anything. Knowing Squires, it certainly isn't over $50, so don't worry about it. I don't think yes, this was a nice one, too, and I bought this. Let's go. Happy birthday to the Lung Association of Pennsylvania. It is 100 years old today. The TB people, oldest volunteer health organization in the whole United States. And, you know, I'm sorry to say, as you probably know, tuberculosis is back again. A very sad statistic. Happy birthday this morning. How sweet it is. Take a look from our Hallmark salute. Cora Cobb of Nashville, Tennessee is 100, lives on her own, takes care of her own apartment, and loves goo-goo bars. And if you're looking for some weather, well, expect summertime around here to disappear for a while. New York's going to be 72, Washington 74. Big storm system moving in, stretching all the way from Carolina, Virginia coast back to the southeast. A lot of rain today. Continued hot in the west. And here's what's happening in your world, even as we tie one on.
Well, we will have a lot of sunshine this morning, but the clouds will be on the increase this afternoon. Good morning, I'm Ed Wilson. 74 degrees for a high this morning, a north-northeasterly wind at 4 to 12. The clouds will be back late this afternoon, and there is another chance for showers late tonight.
That's all. Now here's Brian.
All right, Willie, thanks. On Close-Up this morning, the deteriorating situation in Yugoslavia. As Ann noted moments ago, the UN Security Council today decides if military force should be used to ensure delivery of relief shipments to the war-torn Republic of Bosnia-Herzegovina. The chief consideration, or at least among the chief considerations, is whether or not the presence of international troops would make the situation worse instead of better. Canadian Major General Louis MacKenzie knows that situation well. He's just returned home from commanding UN peacekeeping forces in Sarajevo. This morning he's back in Ottawa. General, good morning.
Good morning, Brian.
Well, what's the quick answer, sir, to the question of whether or not the intervention of international troops would make the situation better or worse?
Well, I guess we won't really know that for sure until it happens and if it happens, but my personal opinion is that you can't sort of take this thing one tiny step at a time, and that intervention in any form, even escorting humanitarian convoys, has the potential to lead to a wide escalation of the problem.
Why? How fine a line are those troops going to have to walk in ensuring delivery of humanitarian aid? Are they of necessity going to wind up getting involved in the conflict itself?
Well, that's up to the sides in the conflict, but if you're driving down the road and somebody's trying to stop you and they don't want you feeding their enemy, then the chances are pretty good that you're going to get involved in a firefight. And it's not going to be possible to control the situation by just air power. That country is God-given for guerrilla operations. So you're going to get your feet dirty whether you like it or not. And once you start fighting and Americans or somebody else, some other Western nation starts getting soldiers killed, then it's going to be necessary to up the ante.
So to your mind, if those troops go in there, we should expect that American soldiers will be killed, will be taken prisoner?
I would think that's a fairly logical deduction, yes.
You just mentioned the, and as you know, there's talk of targeting Serbian positions for selected airstrikes to alleviate the shelling of Sarajevo. My question to you is twofold. How effective do you think that would prove to be, number one? And number two, how risky a proposition would it prove to be?
Well, it's not the desert. It's hilly country like the Ozarks or the Adirondacks. That being the case, it's fairly easy to hide weaponry, and funnily enough, artillery is not the favorite weapon over there. It's the mortar, and the mortar can be hidden and moved very quickly. A good crew can move it in about a minute or two, and you can shove it in the back of a civilian car and move the thing around. So it's not going to be possible to target the equipment that is the most popular. Risky? I would think not that risky. There are air defense units, not a lot of them around Sarajevo, but they do exist. But with the sophisticated weaponry that exists today in the West, it's probably quite safe to fly around in the airspace.
General, let me come back to you in just a moment. Go to Washington first. Indiana Republican Richard Lugar, the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, was the first senator to call for military action, doing so more than 2 months ago on this program. This morning, he's at our NBC News Bureau in Washington. Senator Lugar, good morning.
Good morning, Brian.
I know you don't want to be in the position of saying, see, I told you so, but could we have avoided this if the administration had acted 2 months ago when you told us about it?
No, I don't think it could have been avoided, and I think that General MacKenzie has stated very well the military problems. Our military people would generally be in agreement. It seems to me that we have a tough proposition in which the European countries have chosen not to act. The United States, once again, has had to provide the leadership, both with economic sanctions and now with the resolution of military force. I would think that we're down to at least two situations, one in which military strikes against Serbians in Bosnia or in Serbia are possibilities to get the attention of the Serbians to move toward a ceasefire situation. And the second is, I suppose, to rearm the Bosnians so they provide the ground forces, have a chance to fight for their own country. Third option is simply to recognize that Bosnia has been fairly well taken over by Serbian irregulars, and therefore ought to sue for peace and try to find an end to hostilities that way. And that is unacceptable, at least to most of the world community that believes that Bosnia was an independent state that we've recognized and that aggression should not be rewarded.
Which of those options sounds most attractive to you, rearming the Bosnians and allowing them a better opportunity to defend themselves?
Well, I believe that rearming the Bosnians probably is the best alternative, given the very sad ones that we have, although the option certainly of an ultimatum to Serbia, both in and outside of Bosnia, a chance for a ceasefire to occur and for the London Conference or some other diplomatic situation to begin to sort out the possibilities, that certainly is an attractive option also.
People keep warning, Senator, of troops getting bogged down in a conflict that would seem to have no end in sight. How real a concern is that to your mind?
It's a very real concern, and the President of the United States is not going to allow that. All of the debate about quagmire and getting bogged down, I think, is beside the point, because the United States, as a part of the UN, is not going to be a part of a resolution that puts American ground troops there in harm's way. This is why I stress the options.
But we've just heard General MacKenzie note that ensuring delivery of humanitarian aid does put them in harm's way.
Well, the UN is going to discuss how that can be done, what the best probabilities are of getting the humanitarian aid there. But the UN has to deal with military realistic situations, and among them is that the European forces clearly will not provide ground troops, and the United States will not provide ground troops, and therefore someone will have to do that on the ground, namely Bosnians, if they're to be provided.
So in other words, we'll give the muscle to the Bosnians to get the job done, but we'll have no troops put in imminent danger, to your mind?
That's one alternative. Clearly, the air support that the United States might give would back up whatever the Bosnians are going to do, or perhaps others miraculously come, but they have not certainly shown their faces thus far.
General MacKenzie, how's all that sound to you? Does that sound doable?
Well, I find myself in an awkward position here as a soldier arguing for political intervention, but if we're trying to resolve this issue without killing a lot more people, it seems to me that the international community has to bring even more political pressure to bear on both sides. Now, the Serbs are prepared to talk anytime, any place, anywhere, and that's understandable because they have the territorial gains that they probably want. But it's a matter of bringing pressure to bear on the presidency, and I know the Bosnian citizens don't like to hear me say that, but I've never seen a conflict like this which can be resolved by more fighting unless one side wins, one side loses. Somebody's got to sit down around the table representing all of the various sides in the conflict and talk out a solution.
Understood. General MacKenzie, thank you. Senator Lugar, thank you very much, sir. It's 1/4 the hour. We're back in a moment. This is Today on NBC.
They give me a suit to wear at work. But when I go out to buy one for myself, I head for Foreman & Clark because, frankly, I hope my batting average never drops as low as their prices. Foreman & Clark can and does suit me for less than $200. You don't have to be a Rookie of the Year to appreciate how Foreman & Clark does business. They offer the largest top-quality selection, free after-purchase pressing, minor alterations, and minor repairs. Sometimes my team loses, but I don't think there's any way to beat Foreman & Clark. Let the Foreman & Clark All-Stars suit you up tomorrow.
The Carnival Shoes and Fashions. Your back-to-school headquarters, featuring the largest selection name brand athletic shoes ever. Lowest prices guaranteed. Like LA Gear. Girls Street Flare High, just $19.88. And Rocket Regulator for boys, just $24.88. Plus, with any athletic shoe purchase, $24.97 or higher, choose a pair of children's Sam & Libby Hopscotch or Jacks for just $3. $3. Win a free IBM-compatible computer from Eastland Shoes and the Carnival. Give it away Labor Day, 4 p.m. See store for details. The Carnival Shoes and Fashions. Your back-to-school headquarters.
Last night, Russ Beeler, owner of Lake Edna KFC, opened Hammer's eyes to new popcorn chicken. Delicious, crispy, bite-sized morsels. A whole new way to enjoy the Colonel's chicken. Come on, Hammer. The problem was, no one could get him to go on until the last piece was gone.
Now that's pop.
New KFC popcorn chicken. Treat yourself for $1.99, the band just $5.99 in Lake Edna or your neck of the woods.
This is a special report from Levita Mattress.
I'm at the $1 million moving sale at Levita Mattress, and everyone here is excited.
Listen, young man, I've been buying mattresses at Levita for over 30 years, and now my kids are too.
And I just bought the Platinum Crown.
And I just bought the Millennium.
I just saved 30%.
I just saved 35%.
And I just bought 2 twin beds for my kids.
This has been a special report from the $1 million moving sale happening at all 8 Levita Mattress stores.
The sale ends August 16th.
Secretary of State James Baker's anticipated move to the White House may represent his toughest diplomatic mission ever, winning his friend George Bush another 4 years as president. Baker will need a combination of both diplomacy and strength to get that job done. State Department correspondent John Dancy has been a Baker observer for years. Good morning, John.
Morning, Margaret. Baker told me once that he hoped to be Secretary of State for all of Bush's 8 years in the White House. But that was a long time before George Bush's political troubles began. Now, Bush's fortunes have sunk so low that he has to face the embarrassment of calling on Jim Baker, successful diplomat, to give up his post and rescue him. Baker is one of the most disciplined men I ever met. He could spend bone-wearying hours on a jet, but get off for a meeting with his adrenaline pumping. But his discipline is not perfect. Once on a trip to Cairo, Baker complained bitterly to his staff that he felt like a prisoner. He never got to see anything, never got away from meetings. So, after his next stop to see King Hussein of Jordan, the staff arranged for him to drive from Jordan to Jerusalem, walking across the Allenby Bridge spanning the Jordan River. The trip was hurriedly arranged, a security nightmare, and potentially dangerous. It was a rare break in the icy self-discipline that has kept Baker in perpetual motion since he took over the job almost 4 years ago. Baker is a diplomatic rainmaker. He and his staff devised the formula that allowed the 4 post-war powers to negotiate the reunification of Germany. Although he began by mistrusting Mikhail Gorbachev, Baker soon found that Gorbachev was serious about arms agreements and about peace. Baker concluded 3 arms agreements with the former Soviet Union. A conventional weapons agreement, which saw Soviet troops begin to leave Eastern Europe, a strategic arms agreement signed by Bush and Gorbachev, and after Gorbachev was replaced and the Soviet Union collapsed, even further cuts with Boris Yeltsin. Baker is likely to be remembered most for bringing about peace talks in the Middle East, a curious distinction for a man who didn't even visit the region until his tenure was almost half over. Indeed, Baker's early attempts to get Arabs and Israelis together were frustrated by what he saw as Israeli foot-dragging. At one point, he delivered a highly public rebuke to Israeli leaders.
The telephone number is 1-202-525-5555. 456-1414. When you're serious about peace, call us.
Baker is a superb negotiator to whom timing is everything. He saw the Gulf War as an opportunity for peace in the region, a window, he called it, that would be open only a short time. He set off on an exhausting shuttle that would take him to the Middle East 8 times in 1 year. Through his efforts, those ancient enemies, Israel, Syria, Jordan, the Palestinians, and Egypt, sat down together at the peace table in Madrid last fall. He leaves at a crucial time.
The problem here is that the negotiators are now ripe for the deal. I think James Baker, as deal maker, would recognize that this is the moment to actually make the deal with the substance, because you have an Israeli government that's prepared to move forward in the negotiations. And the challenge now is not to move the Israelis, but to get the Arabs to respond.
Baker and George Bush are the best of friends and have been for more than 3 decades. Bush brought Baker into politics, and Baker may be the only one who can talk straight to Bush and make him listen.
Well, the question is whether Jim Baker is quite as good as Jim Baker's press releases, and that, I think, will be the test. He was critical in 1988, and that's the election in which his reputation rests. But in previous elections, from 1976, he either got somebody elected who would have been elected anyway, Ronald Reagan in 1984, or he didn't do all that well.
Baker was the indispensable man in Bush's last campaign, running it, but somehow escaping blame for the excesses of low-blow politics like the Willie Horton ad. He is a complex man, a fly fisherman and turkey hunter who chews tobacco when he's away from Washington. A Princeton-trained conservative lawyer, the son and grandson of lawyers. A gifted backroom political deal maker who seems tongue-tied and stiff when asked to do the spade work of retail politics, handshaking and speechifying. He is the most successful of George Bush's appointees, and the Middle East peace process may falter without him. Baker's problem is that he is, as they say in sports, the franchise. Diplomacy may miss him, but without him at Bush's side, the Bush team may not play another season. And of course, even with Baker on the team, there may not be another season. But Margaret, it's going to be an interesting stretch drive.
It will. John, thank you. We're back with more on Today after this.
Unforgiven. Critics call it a great Western, one of the year's best films. Joel Siegel, Good Morning America. Classic,